I am my mother's lawyer." The declaration rang out powerfully from the corner of the courtroom, which had been steeped in tense silence. Olivia Thompson's small but resolute voice, just 9 years old, instantly thickened the air. All eyes, once fixed on towering stacks of legal briefs, swung toward her in astonishment and confusion. Judge Thomas Harrison looked up from the documents he was reading, his bifocals slowly sliding down his nose as he tried to make sense of what was unfolding. A veteran jurist with over 30 years on the bench, he had seen his fair share of oddities. Yet never had he witnessed a 9-year-old stand in the midst of a multi-million-dollar custody battle and claim to be her mother's legal representative. "Young lady," Judge Harrison said gently but firmly, striving to mask his surprise. "This is a serious legal proceeding between adults. Are you certain you understand what you're doing?" With a graceful flick of her glossy black curls behind her ear, Olivia nudged her tortoiseshell glasses back into place on her nose. She nodded confidently, her voice crystal clear as she spoke each word with precise enunciation. "Your Honor, under Article 12 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which the United States has ratified, children like me have the right to express our views on matters directly affecting our lives. Clearly, this custody suit impacts me more than anyone." Silence descended on the courtroom like a heavy curtain. Even the ticking of the wall clock sounded louder, each second stretching taut with tension. The seasoned attorneys in tailored suits, who had earlier exuded confidence with meticulously prepared case files, now wore looks of bewilderment. Confronted by a child citing international law, they had no words, no strategy. Janet Thompson, Olivia's mother, went from shock to pride in an instant, her expression quickly tinged with worry. She had believed her daughter's legal studies were merely an innocent pastime, never imagining Olivia had been secretly preparing for the most important battle of their lives. "Olivia," Janet whispered, her voice quavering with emotion, "you don't have to do this." Olivia turned to her mother, her gaze gentle yet unyielding, her small hand gripping a little green notebook she had brought. "No one can do this better than me, Mom," she replied softly, her eyes shining with determination. Across the aisle, Kevin Wellington, Olivia's wealthy father fighting for custody, paled as if doused with ice water. He nearly dropped his coffee cup. His navy suit, worth thousands, suddenly felt like a lead weight. Kevin was used to bending the world to his will with money and influence, but the unexpected appearance of a daughter he'd nearly forgotten shook him to his core. He leaned toward his lead counsel, Jonathan Mitchell, who rose to reclaim control, though his eyes betrayed the same dismay. Clearing his throat, Mitchell spoke with forced authority. "Your Honor, we appreciate the child's passion. However, legal representation in a family court proceeding demands expertise that, obviously, a 9-year-old cannot provide." Olivia swung her gaze to Mitchell and delivered a cutting rebuttal that silenced everyone. "If you truly cared about my welfare, you'd want to hear what I have to say, rather than trying to shut me down." Mitchell stood agape, as if struck at his very pride. Olivia's icy, unwavering tone was that of a seasoned litigator, not a child. The courtroom hung on a knife edge of anticipation. No one had foreseen that this high-stakes custody dispute between storied lawyers and a billionaire would pivot on the bold entrance of a 9-year-old girl. Olivia Thompson stood tall, her clear eyes now alight with unwavering resolve. She opened her notebook to the first page, ready to unveil the months of clandestine preparation she'd undertaken. Every person present sensed that this was merely the prelude to a trial destined to shake not only the Wellington fortune, but society's very view of a child's rights and voice. The courtroom held its breath, waiting for Olivia's next revelation. The courtroom remained deathly silent as every eye fixed on Olivia, poised to reveal the very first truth she'd meticulously documented. Across from her, Kevin Wellington's face had flushed scarlet, then drained to ashen blue, as he realized his darkest secrets were about to be laid bare in broad daylight. Olivia met her father's gaze, eyes as cold as she'd ever known them, devoid of any hint of affection. She flipped to the first page of her notebook, took a steadying breath as if rallying her courage, and then spoke clearly, her voice resonating through the vast chamber. "Before anyone understands why I'm standing here, you should know exactly what my mother and I have endured over the years." Behind her, Janet Thompson, Olivia's single mother, watched with a mix of pride and anxiety. Unlike Kevin and his well-heeled legal team, Janet wore simple clothes, a faded light blue blouse, its color softened by countless washings, reflecting the hardships she'd faced to support her daughter. For years, Janet had toiled tirelessly as a nursing assistant at St. Mary's Hospital on Chicago's outskirts. Dawn to dusk, she cared for the elderly and infirm on a meager wage barely enough for two. Her hands were calloused from lifting patients. Her eyes, though always warm when they fell on Olivia, carried the weight of exhaustion. Janet never gave up. She once worked a continuous 12-hour shift just to save up for Olivia's new textbooks at the start of school. Many nights she went hungry so her daughter could eat, hiding her tears of helplessness at their scarcity. In stark contrast, Kevin Wellington was Chicago's most powerful reel, estate magnate, always picture, perfect in bespoke suits, flaunting luxury watches, and a lifestyle others envied. Yet beneath that polished veneer lay a man cold, selfish, and never one to value anyone but himself. Kevin and Janet had a brief, ill-fated romance more than a decade ago. When Janet told him she was expecting Olivia, his only response was a small check and a chilling note. "Take care of yourself, and her. I want no further contact." His cruelty toward a life on the brink of birth was terrifying in its callousness. Throughout Olivia's childhood, Kevin showed up only rarely, and never more than a few staged minutes at a time. On her 5th birthday, he surprised Janet's home with a lavish gift and a camera crew in tow, later using the footage to craft a benevolent philanthropist image in the press. But once the cameras left, he vanished without a word, leaving his bewildered daughter behind. Another Christmas, he appeared solely to have his photo taken beside their decorated tree, promoting his company on social media, before slipping away to his waiting luxury car, leaving Olivia at the window with tears in her bright eyes. Olivia grew up craving her father's love, but never once received it from Kevin Wellington. Instead, she saw her mother's unconditional sacrifice in vivid detail, the woman who stood by her and taught her to be strong and resilient, no matter the hardship. Now, standing in court, Olivia fully understood that her father's rare visits had always been about his own image and gain. He never once asked about her well-being or feelings, only surfacing when it served his needs. And now, facing the threat of losing everything, he'd come back to claim Olivia in a bid to access a substantial inheritance from her late grandmother's trust. The courtroom fell silent at Olivia's account. Truth spoken so plainly it was like a razor slicing through Kevin Wellington's glossy facade. Even his high-priced lawyers couldn't immediately refute her words. Olivia drew a deep breath, determination shining in her eyes. "It's because of his irresponsibility and hypocrisy that I'm here today. I must speak for myself, because if I were silent, the truth would remain hidden forever." Her words echoed through the hall, stirring powerful emotions in everyone present. Kevin Wellington finally realized his greatest nightmare was only just beginning. The courtroom remained heavy with silence as Olivia closed the chapter on her heart-wrenching account of the life she and her mother had endured. Every word cut through Kevin Wellington's glossy facade like shards of glass. She drew a slow, steady breath, her gaze unwavering as she turned to face her father and spoke with unshakable resolve. But today, I'm not just here to recount the past. I'm here to expose the real motive behind why this man suddenly wants custody of me, a motive he's deliberately hidden from the court and everyone present. Kevin Wellington jolted as if shocked, his fingers trembling as they gripped the edge of the bench. He exchanged a worried look with lead counsel Jonathan Mitchell, who struggled to maintain a composed exterior, even as confusion and stress welled up in his eyes. Olivia opened her little notebook again, her voice calm yet piercingly sharp for someone her age. My grandmother, Emily Wellington, who passed away 7 years ago, set up a special trust fund of $1.7 million just for me. A fund my father, Kevin Wellington, never once mentioned until he found himself in financial ruin. A ripple of astonishment swept through the courtroom. Low murmurs began to break the oppressive quiet. Kevin swallowed hard, beads of sweat forming at his hairline. Each of Olivia's words struck at the confidence and reputation he'd spent decades building. She continued with icy clarity. He never cared about that fund or why Grandma created it to secure my future. But everything changed over the past year, after he suffered a string of costly lawsuits and a highly publicized divorce. Kevin closed his eyes briefly, bitterness flooding him as his most humiliating failures were laid bare. Indeed, the past year had been the darkest of his life. Wellington Holdings had lost case after case, exposing shady deals and betrayals. News outlets plastered his misdeeds across their pages, sparking a wave of backlash and lost investor trust. But that wasn't the worst part. His marriage to Victoria Summers, his third wife and a famous TV personality, crumbled as soon as his wealth and power evaporated. Victoria accused him of deceit, exploitation, and hiding assets during the divorce proceedings. The scandalous breakup shredded his prestige and left him desperate when he realized that everyone around him had stood by him for his money and influence, not for who he was. In that moment of desperation, Kevin remembered the $1.7 million trust fund his mother, Emily, had set up for her only granddaughter, Olivia Thompson. If he gained legal custody, he could freely access those funds under the guise of supporting and caring for his daughter. It was a perfect plan. A plan to exploit the very child he had long abandoned. Olivia locked eyes with her father as though she could see every bitter truth in his soul. I know you never cared how I was raised, never wanted to be my father. You treated me as a burden, a secret to hide from the world. But now that you've lost everything, I've suddenly become the tool you need to claw back what you've lost. Her cold words resonated in every heart in that courtroom. Even Judge Thomas Harrison sat stunned by her maturity and insight, far beyond her years. Unable to contain himself, Kevin slammed his hand on the bench, startling everyone. This little girl is lying. I never intended any of that. I genuinely want to make up for lost time with my daughter. Jonathan Mitchell hurriedly placed a hand on Kevin's shoulder, trying to soothe him. But Kevin's outburst only deepened everyone's suspicions. Olivia remained composed. She shook her head slightly, then posed a final, cutting question that left her father speechless. Then please explain why you only sought custody after you went bankrupt and divorced. Why, for 9 years of my life, did you never once reach out to ask how my mother and I were doing? Kevin opened his mouth to argue, but could not find a word. Olivia's question landed like a punch to his chest, shattering every false excuse he'd prepared. For the first time in his life, Kevin Wellington felt utterly powerless before the entire courtroom. She closed her notebook gently, her eyes bright with determination. "You taught me the difference between truth and lies, and today I refuse to let the truth be buried in the shadows you created." Her final words echoed through the room, making it clear to all that this was only the beginning of a fierce battle, one that Olivia would fight tirelessly until real justice prevailed. As Olivia's final words faded into the hush of the courtroom, Kevin Wellington slumped in his chair, his eyes wild with alarm. Only now did he realize that his daughter was not the fragile, docile child he'd always assumed. Olivia spared her father one more measured glance before turning to Judge Harrison. She placed her notebook on the bench, drew in a steadying breath, and spoke again. Her tone softer now, but every bit as powerful. "You may be wondering how a 9-year-old like me could know every statute, every record, and every detail of Mr. Wellington's past. Well, this is when I introduce someone very special, someone who has quietly helped me prepare for today." She gestured toward the back row, where a petite woman in her 40s sat, hair neatly pinned and eyes shining with pride. That woman was Mary Rodriguez, head librarian at the City Central Library, who had devoted months to guiding Olivia step by step on her journey for justice, for her mother, and for herself. "Ms. Mary Rodriguez first taught me how to locate and study public records," Olivia explained, her voice brimming with gratitude as she looked toward Mary. "She helped me understand the meaning behind every law and every legal precedent." Mary nodded gently, her expression warm and proud. For her, the story began one March afternoon nearly a year ago, when Olivia first wandered into the library. Mary had no idea that this bright-eyed little girl was secretly determined to challenge a powerful, unfeeling father. At first, Mary thought Olivia was merely an exceptionally bright child with a keen interest in the law, but she soon noticed the girl's unusual seriousness. Olivia stayed late, meticulously taking notes and poring over case studies with a focus no child her age displayed. It was clear there was a deeper motivation behind her studies. "Why do you want to learn about the law, Olivia?" Mary had asked during a quiet, late afternoon session when they were the only two people left in the library. Olivia's eyes had gleamed with determination as she replied, her voice trembling but resolute. "I need to protect my mother. I have to understand the law, because if I don't, that man will take me away, and my mother will have nothing left." From that moment, Mary understood the weight of Olivia's burden. Moved by the girl's devotion and courage, she became Olivia's mentor and ally on this challenging path. Day after day, Olivia spent hours at the library. She mastered legal databases and navigated public documents that even many adults found daunting. She examined files from Kevin Wellington's past lawsuits, cases involving property disputes, custody battles, and statutes protecting children's rights. Olivia's world shifted into a new, secretive phase, one fueled by hope. The city library became her second home, where page by page, law book by law book, she prepared to safeguard her and her mother's future under Mary Rodriguez's devoted guidance. One night, Janet returned home early and found Olivia missing. Frantic, she raced to the library and froze at the sight of her daughter surrounded by towering stacks of family, law texts, financial records, and children's rights codes. "Olivia, what are you doing?" Janet's voice cracked, torn between pride and heartbreak. Olivia turned, her gaze serious yet tinged with fear. She rose slowly, approached her mother, took her hand, and said firmly, "Mom, I'm doing what I have to do." If I'm not prepared, we'll lose each other." Janet swept her daughter into her arms, tears streaming down her face. In that embrace, a mother's heart ached and swelled with pride at how much stronger her little girl had become. In her mother's arms, Olivia whispered with unwavering resolve, "Trust me. We will win. We deserve a peaceful life." From that day on, Janet stood quietly behind Olivia, though her worry never faded. She knew her daughter faced a formidable opponent, a wealthy, ruthless man who would stop at nothing to win. Now, in the courtroom, Olivia's eyes found her mother's, sending a look of love and strength, proof that her months of preparation would not be in vain. "I stand here today not just as my mother's daughter," Olivia declared, her voice steady. "I stand here because of everything I've learned from Ms. Rodriguez, from these books, and from the truths I uncovered in the library. I will not back down, for I believe in justice." Her gaze then locked onto Kevin Wellington, a silent challenge sparking in her eyes. Armed with the sharpest weapons of all, truth and knowledge, Olivia was ready to expose every secret he'd tried to hide. The courtroom fell into a tense silence the moment Olivia's powerful declaration ended, making even the softest breath feel painfully loud. Kevin Wellington cleared his throat with a dry swallow. He'd never before felt such a deep, smoldering fear rising within him. His trembling fingers fumbled to loosen his expensive silk tie, and beads of sweat began to stain the pristine white collar of his shirt. Olivia remained composed, her face alight with resolve, and continued. "From the very start, Mr. Wellington insisted that his motive for seeking custody was love and responsibility as a father. But if that were true, why did he wait until now, after losing all his wealth and reputation, to suddenly appear and claim he wants to act like a parent?" Without hesitation, Olivia opened the small briefcase beside her and carefully removed a thick stack of documents, arranged chronologically. She held them up high for Judge Harrison and the attorneys to see. "Your Honor, these are certified copies of public legal records detailing Mr. Kevin Wellington's actions over the past year. From his failed lawsuit against his largest partner, Hanson Real Estate Group, to his divorce from Ms. Victoria Summers, every step is transparently recorded in the city court's files." Kevin visibly jolted at the mention of Hanson and Victoria. He raised a hand to cover his mouth, struggling in vain to maintain his composure. His eyes darted to his legal team, pleading for rescue, but all he saw were looks of helpless confusion. Jonathan Mitchell, the high-priced attorney Kevin trusted most, found himself uncharacteristically flustered as a child laid out clear, irrefutable evidence. "These successive defeats have driven Mr. Wellington into a severe financial crisis," Olivia continued, her voice steady yet ringing like an alarm bell. "After losing the case against Hanson, his most valuable assets and properties were frozen to satisfy the judgment. Shortly thereafter, his costly divorce from Ms. Summers resulted in a settlement that left him nearly penniless." The courtroom hung on Olivia's every word. Judge Harrison furrowed his brow, keenly observing the mounting evidence. Olivia calmly flipped through the documents, pointing out figures and entries she had spent months deciphering and organizing. "In my grandmother, Emily Wellington's trust documents, it's explicitly stated that Mr. Wellington may only access the $1.7 million trust if he has full custody of and directly supports me," Olivia explained, her gaze harder than ever. "Otherwise, I gain sole control of the funds when I turn 18, and Mr. Wellington cannot touch a single penny." At that, Kevin could no longer contain himself. He leapt to his feet and barked, paying no mind to the judge or counsel. "You don't understand anything. That money belongs to me. It's money I should have been able to use long ago." In a panic, Jonathan Mitchell rose and placed a hand on Kevin's shoulder, trying to calm him. But Kevin shoved him away, his polished demeanor gone, replaced by a face contorted with rage and desperation. Olivia remained unshaken. She folded her arms and replied in a cold, decisive tone, "No, Mr. Wellington. That money was left to me by my grandmother because she knew you'd try to seize it if she wasn't careful. That's why she established the trust with such strict conditions." Olivia's cutting rebuke stunned the courtroom. Kevin slumped back into his chair as if struck. Now, every dark motive he'd tried to hide lay exposed in the bright light of truth. Kevin's expensive legal team murmured among themselves, hurriedly flipping through the records in search of a loophole. But the more they searched, the clearer it became that Olivia had prepared impeccably. All her evidence came from public court filings, impossible to dispute or deny. Jonathan Mitchell shook his head in frustration and pity, regretting that he hadn't told his client the full story from the start. For the first time, Kevin Wellington realized he'd grossly underestimated his young daughter. He had never believed Olivia capable or clever enough to methodically outmaneuver him. Now cornered, his breath came in ragged gasps, and he had no idea what to do next. Gently, Olivia closed the file and looked at her father with calm determination. "You treated me as an easily manipulated child, but today I will show you that a child armed with truth and resolve can do what even your highest-priced lawyers cannot hide." A perfect, absolute silence settled over the courtroom. No one could refute what Olivia had presented. All eyes turned to Kevin Wellington, who had no defense left. The trial's momentum had unmistakably shifted, and the one in command was a 9-year-old girl named Olivia Thompson. The courtroom remained stiflingly silent as Olivia slowly set the stack of files on the table. Her eyes locked onto Kevin Wellington, the man desperately trying to hide his panic-ridden tremor. Olivia knew the pivotal moment had arrived, and she was about to unveil the single, most damning piece of evidence that would shatter her father's carefully constructed mask. "I realize," Olivia began softly, each word ringing like an alarm bell, "that the evidence I've already presented has exposed Mr. Wellington's true motives, but I have one last piece of proof, an indisputable one because it's his own voice." Kevin jumped at her words, his face draining white. His eyes widened in utter confusion as he stared helplessly at his daughter. His fingers clenched the edge of the bench, and he seemed to choke as fear coursed through every fiber of his being. Jonathan Mitchell, the high-priced attorney famed for his poise, stood frozen beside him, doubt and unease written all over his face. In his storied career, he'd never been so completely upended, let alone by a 9-year-old. Without another word, Olivia reached into her coat pocket and produced a small silver recorder, holding it high for everyone to see. Her voice remained steady, even icy. "Your Honor, this is a recording I made 2 months ago, the last time Mr. Wellington visited my mother and me. He assumed I was in the next room doing homework and didn't know I'd placed this device right where he was on the phone." Kevin bolted upright, eyes bulging, voice quavering uncontrollably. "That's impossible. That's a violation of privacy. You can't use that recording as evidence." Judge Harrison raised a hand to halt Kevin's panicked protest. "Mr. Wellington, let the girl proceed. I will determine the admissibility of this evidence." Kevin collapsed back into his seat, hands over his head, the weight of despair crushing him. Olivia, astonishingly calm, pressed play. A soft hiss filled the hush, and then Kevin's own voice echoed clearly through the courtroom. "I told you, once I win custody, I'm sending her to Riverside Military Academy. They charge only $500 a month for problem children like her, and I'll have unrestricted access to the rest of that trust fund." Absolute silence followed, broken only by gasps of shock and outrage aimed at Kevin. His words cut through Janet Thompson's heart like a knife. Her daughter's father, the man Olivia longed to love, revealed as cold and merciless. Janet covered her mouth, tears tracing lines down her worn face. Kevin's recorded voice continued, flat and uncaring. "She doesn't need to know any of this. To the public, I'll remain the model dad while she's disciplined off somewhere so she won't bother me again. Perfect plan, right?" Kevin bowed his head, shoulders shaking under the weight of his own confession. He could feel the courtroom's hatred piercing him like daggers. Every facade he'd erected over the years lay in ruins. Jonathan Mitchell sighed bitterly with his eyes closed. He realized he'd already lost this battle. Not to the opposing counsel, but to a 9-year-old's razor, sharp courage, tenacity, and clarity. When the recording ended, Olivia switched off the device. Her voice, soft yet powerful, filled the room once more. "Your Honor, the truth is now clear. Mr. Wellington's motive was never love or responsibility. It was unbridled greed, a scheme to seize my grandmother's legacy." Murmurs of disgust rippled through the courtroom as judges and jurors alike stared at Kevin Wellington. Judge Harrison regarded Olivia with solemn respect, then turned a steely gaze on Kevin. "Mr. Wellington, do you have anything to say in your defense?" Kevin opened his mouth, but no words came. In that instant, he knew he'd lost everything: his reputation, his career, and the final chance to be Olivia's father. The secrets he'd buried for years had become irrefutable proof against him. Across the room, Olivia stood tall, her clear eyes blazing with strength. She had proven that justice, truth, and the bravery of one little girl could utterly topple the power and wealth of a calculating, ambitious man. In that moment, Olivia realized she had won. Not just for herself, but for every child ever underestimated and exploited by those they should have been able to trust. The echo of that recording had barely faded when a heavy gloom settled over the courtroom. Kevin Wellington sat perfectly still, his face ghostly pale, eyes staring blankly into space as if trying to escape the piercing truth he had just revealed. Olivia remained standing tall, her resolve and courage like the brightest lighthouse shining through a sky darkened by selfish schemes. Judge Harrison looked at Olivia with unmistakable admiration. He adjusted his glasses and spoke in a warm yet firm voice. "Olivia, is there anything else you wish to add?" "The court is listening." Olivia gave a slight nod, gently opened another stack of files before her, and began slowly but with absolute confidence. "Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to talk about the place Mr. Wellington planned to send me. Riverside Military Academy." A jolt ran through Janet Thompson at the mention of that name. She covered her mouth, her heart pounding, her breath caught in her throat. She'd heard vague rumors about Riverside, but never imagined her daughter nearly being sent to a place so dreaded by the community. Olivia gave her mother a reassuring glance, then turned back to Judge Harrison and spoke in a clear, steady voice. "While investigating Mr. Wellington's plan, I also thoroughly researched the school he intended for me. What I discovered was truly shocking." Kevin trembled, panic overtaking him. He'd never imagined Olivia would dig this deep. The truth about Riverside was something he'd long kept hidden, even from himself. Olivia continued, presenting photographs and authenticated documents she'd gathered from news articles and public federal records. "Your Honor, Riverside is far from an ordinary school. It is currently under federal investigation for grave allegations of violence and student abuse. In the past 3 years, at least 3 students have died due to physical and psychological abuse there." A wave of horrified whispers swept the courtroom. Everyone's gaze turned cold and appalled on Kevin Wellington. He bowed his head, as though the entire world had turned against him. Olivia flipped to another page, her tone resolute, and leaving no room for doubt. Last month, the FBI released a report finding that several administrators at Riverside systematically abused students. An ongoing inquiry is examining physical assaults and brutal disciplinary practices that far exceed any acceptable standard. By then, Janet Thompson was utterly broken. Tears streamed down her face as a mother's heart ached, imagining her little girl enduring such horrors. She clutched her chest, her breathing shallow with fear and grief, realizing just how close she'd come to failing to protect her daughter from Kevin's cruel, inhumane scheme. Olivia looked at her mother with a loving, encouraging smile, then turned back to Judge Harrison, her voice stronger than ever. As you've heard, Mr. Wellington knew exactly what goes on there, yet he still planned to send me so he could seize my grandmother's trust fund. He didn't care what might happen to me as long as his selfish plan succeeded. Jonathan Mitchell sat in utter silence, hands folded on the table, head bowed. The once formidable attorney could only watch, helpless, as his client's true, merciless nature lay bare in the courtroom, his defense utterly destroyed. Kevin Wellington appeared hollowed out, lips quivering, unable to muster even a single defense. Olivia's revelations had stripped away the final veneer, hiding his cruelty and greed. Judge Harrison cleared his throat, his authoritative gaze fixed on Kevin. Mr. Wellington, it seems these allegations are well supported, and I will order a full investigation. But at this moment I have one question. Were you truly aware of the horrors at Riverside when you decided to send your daughter there? Kevin tried to lift his head but could only shake it weakly, his vacant eyes giving away the cruel reality of his motives. Olivia stood unmoved, her bright eyes calm as she awaited the judge's next decision. Judge Harrison regarded her with deep respect. Her razor, sharp reasoning, maturity, and honesty had thoroughly convinced him. He spoke with solemn authority. "Thank you, Olivia. The court will give full consideration to the information you have provided. We will continue to seek the truth, for justice must always protect the most vulnerable among us." The entire courtroom looked to Olivia with admiration and gratitude. In that moment, she knew her long, arduous fight was drawing to a close, and that truth, just as she had always believed, would prevail. The moment Judge Harrison's solemn words fell silent, the courtroom remained thick with tension. Kevin Wellington sat utterly undone by the evidence Olivia had just presented. He tried in vain to avoid the angry stares around him. Even the formidable legal team at his side looked at him now with disappointment and disillusionment, as though he were a stranger. Olivia drew a steadying breath, her expression grave and her eyes brighter than ever. She knew the battle wasn't over, and now was the perfect moment to lay down her final card. A piece of evidence more potent, more profound, and more bitter than anything shown before. "Your Honor," Olivia said softly but firmly, "I wish to introduce one more crucial piece of evidence. A letter written by my late grandmother, Emily Wellington." At her grandmother's name, Kevin started, his face blanching. He glanced at Olivia with a mixture of horror and dread. Emily was the one person he had always feared, whose warnings about his selfishness he'd consistently ignored. Olivia gently withdrew a small, carefully preserved envelope, opened it, and her hand trembled with emotion as she read aloud. "My dearest Olivia, when you read this letter, I know I will no longer be here to protect you. But remember, wherever I am, my heart is with you. I established this trust to safeguard you, your future, from the one person who should have loved you most, your father, Kevin. Each word struck Kevin like a dagger. His lips moved soundlessly in denial, but he could not hide the shock on his face. Emily's letter tore away the final veil he'd tried to hide behind. Olivia continued, her voice breaking but unwavering. I knew Kevin well. My son never truly cared about anyone but himself. When I learned Janet was pregnant with you, he hid it from me and everyone else. I had to hire someone to discover your existence, my beloved granddaughter. That is why I created this trust with the strictest conditions, to ensure Kevin could never exploit it. Janet Thompson trembled with rage, tears blurring her vision as she stared down the man who had caused her so much pain and humiliation. Memories flooded back, telling Kevin she was pregnant, only to be met with cold indifference and a demand to handle it yourself before he erased all traces of them from his life. But Emily, guided by love and compassion, had uncovered the truth and quietly supported Janet and Olivia. Realizing she had never truly been alone, Janet felt both sorrow and solace. Olivia pressed on, her reading clear and resolute. Kevin was the greatest sorrow of my life. But you, Olivia, were the greatest gift I could ever receive. This trust is all I could do to ensure Kevin's greed and selfishness would never harm you. Be strong, my granddaughter, and always remember, though I cannot be by your side, I will love you forever. As Emily's final words echoed through the courtroom, an absolute stillness fell, broken only by Janet's suppressed sobs. Kevin Wellington sat shattered, head bowed, fists clenched, but powerless to object. Judge Harrison slowly removed his glasses, rubbing his temple as compassion filled his gaze. In all his years on the bench, he had never seen a trial so emotionally charged, especially with such painful truths laid bare by a 9-year-old. Olivia, he said gently but firmly, thank you for your courage in sharing your grandmother's letter. It will greatly aid the court in reaching a just decision. Janet wrapped her arms around Olivia, tears flowing freely. She felt both anguish for her daughter's suffering and immense pride in Olivia's bravery, intelligence, and resilience. For Janet, the painful truth was infinitely better than living forever under a shroud of lies. Across the courtroom, Kevin Wellington sat like a ghost, his shame complete. Regret could not undo the heartbreak he'd caused, nor restore the chance to be a father to Olivia. And everyone present understood that, after today, Kevin Wellington's life could never be the same. Justice had finally spoken. As the last echoes of Grandmother Emily's letter faded, Olivia gently set the worn envelope aside. Her clear, sharp eyes locked once more on Kevin Wellington, who now seemed nothing more than a hollow shadow, silently bearing the contemptuous glares directed at him. But Olivia knew there remained one more brutal truth that had to be exposed to the court and everyone present. Her voice grew more solemn than ever. Your Honor, Mr. Kevin Wellington has not only tried to exploit his own daughter to seize trust, fund money. In fact, this is far from the first time he has preyed on those less powerful to enrich himself. I have uncovered clear evidence of earlier financial fraud schemes he orchestrated. Olivia quickly opened a large file, revealing meticulously organized documents, photographs, and detailed reports. Her tone was steady and incisive. In recent years, Mr. Wellington carried out a series of financial scams targeting struggling families, hardworking laborers, immigrants, and small businesses in Chicago. I'd like to present a few representative cases so the court can understand his true character. She held up the first photograph. The Martinez family, their eyes filled with sorrow and desperation. This is the Martinez family, Olivia continued, her voice catching slightly with emotion. They ran a small bakery, their only source of income. When their young son was hospitalized with a serious heart condition, Mr. Wellington approached them and persuaded them to sign a predatory loan agreement with exorbitant interest. A few months later, he foreclosed on their shop for a pittance, leaving them with nothing. Outraged whispers rippled through the courtroom. Kevin trembled, unable to meet the accusing gazes all around, as shame and humiliation rose in his throat. Olivia then produced another photograph. An elderly woman with a haunted expression. This is Mrs. Anna Thompson, a widow who owned a modest home on Chicago's outskirts. Mr. Wellington exploited her loneliness, convincing her to mortgage her house for repairs under vaguely worded terms. Soon after, Mrs. Thompson was forced out of the home she'd lived in for over 40 years. Mr. Wellington then flipped it for a profit many times greater than his initial outlay. The courtroom fell into a pained hush, every listener feeling the cruelty of his actions. Janet Thompson trembled with a mix of anger and sorrow, recalling how she herself had almost fallen victim to Wellington's schemes. Olivia pressed on with further examples. Factory workers robbed of their pensions, store owners cheated out of their livelihoods by deceptive contracts, and impoverished immigrant families driven from their homes by insurmountable debts engineered by him. "Your Honor," Olivia's voice quavered with righteous indignation. These people had no means to fight back. They couldn't afford attorneys to stand up to Mr. Wellington. They could only endure, bitterly watching him grow ever richer on their sweat, their tears, and their pain. Today, I stand not only to defend my own rights, but to speak on behalf of all those he has trampled so that justice may be served. A fierce light shone in Olivia's eyes, steadfast courage inspiring admiration across the courtroom. Judge Harrison nodded slowly, visibly moved by the extraordinary bravery of this 9-year-old confronting such grave injustices. Kevin Wellington's legal team sat defeated, fully aware that their client had dug a grave of his own making, sacrificing his reputation and career for personal gain. Kevin himself slumped forward, head in his hands, too ashamed even to raise his eyes. Olivia closed the file, looking directly at her father with calm resolve. "Mr. Wellington, you may have believed that wealth and power could shield you from accountability. But today you have seen that truth prevails, and I hope you understand that no one stands above justice. Those you have harmed will finally see it done." The courtroom erupted in unanimous support for Olivia's final words. All eyes rested on her, the child who had become a symbol of courage and faith in justice, even against seemingly insurmountable wrongs. And for Kevin Wellington, everything built on deceit and greed lay in ruins before the undeniable power of truth. The moment Olivia's final declaration ended, the courtroom remained trapped in a suffocating, haunting silence. Every pair of eyes seemed glued to the small girl, whose extraordinary strength had completely stripped away the veneer of false morality and bottomless greed from Kevin Wellington. He sat motionless now, his body slumped as if all the power and wealth he once commanded had been drained away by the very truths he had worked so hard to bury. Judge Thomas Harrison paused thoughtfully, his gaze on Olivia brimming with unmistakable respect. Never in his decades on the bench had he witnessed a trial so charged, so profound, and so shocking, especially one driven by a mere 9-year-old. After carefully considering all the evidence, testimony, and details that Olivia Thompson has presented so clearly, honestly, and comprehensively, Judge Harrison's voice rang out, measured and authoritative. This court is fully persuaded by the authenticity and weight of that evidence. He paused, fixing Kevin Wellington with a stern look that offered no room for doubt. This court hereby dismisses in its entirety Kevin Wellington's petition for custody, on the grounds that his motives were clearly improper, exploitative, and unethical. Furthermore, I order the immediate initiation of a full investigation into the allegations of trust, fund fraud, and other financial misconduct involving Mr. Wellington, based on the evidence Olivia Thompson has provided. A ripple of whispers swept through the courtroom. Kevin trembled violently, panic in his eyes as he scanned the room, but no one came to his aid. Jonathan Mitchell and the Hi-Ho, powered attorneys, who once defended him for exorbitant fees, now turned away, their faces cold and disappointed. All of Kevin's money and influence proved meaningless in the face of justice finally being served. Judge Harrison beckoned to the courthouse marshal, his voice strong and decisive. The court orders the immediate arrest of Kevin Wellington to face criminal charges for fraud, breach of trust, and related financial crimes. Kevin bolted to his feet, panic-stricken, his protests choking off in his throat. A marshal moved in swiftly, cuffing him to the stunned gasps of everyone present. The image of a man once powerful and wealthy, now collapsed into a criminal being led out of the courtroom, was searing and unforgettable. Janet Thompson embraced Olivia, tears streaming down her cheeks in a mix of joy and fierce relief. Her heart fluttered with both pain and pride as she realized that, at last, justice had prevailed, though the cost of this victory had been bitter and harsh. Janet whispered to her daughter in a voice thick with emotion, "My darling girl, I am so proud of you. You have done something more extraordinary than I ever imagined." Olivia squeezed her mother's hand and offered a gentle, knowing smile, mature and strong beyond her years. She watched in silence as her father, the man she once longed to love, was escorted away. In that moment, she understood that she had secured the most important prize of all: truth and justice. Judge Harrison turned to Olivia once more, his tone softening into one of genuine warmth and admiration. "Olivia, you have shown remarkable courage today. You have not only defended your own rights, but also given hope and faith to many others. This court, and I personally, are immensely proud of you." The courtroom erupted in heartfelt applause, a tribute to the brave young girl who had stood alone against wealth and power to uphold the truth. Outside, media cameras flashed as Kevin Wellington was led from the courthouse, besieged by stares and shouted questions. He had neither the strength nor the credibility to answer. His life, career, and reputation lay in ruins. There was nothing left to salvage. Back inside, Olivia calmly gathered her files and evidence. She felt herself grow in depth and maturity through this fierce ordeal. She knew her life, and her mother's, would be profoundly changed from this day forward. No longer would she fear having her right to live with her mother stripped away, nor dread the schemes of a father who had betrayed her. From this moment on, Olivia recognized that she had become a symbol of justice and the power of courage and truth. Deep in her heart, she knew this fight was not just about defeating a cruel parent, but about showing the world that, even in the darkest times, the light of justice and compassion will always prevail. The courtroom had just fallen silent when the final round of applause died away, signaling the start of a new chapter in everyone's life. Olivia gently gathered the documents from the table and glanced up at her mother, Janet, who was holding her tightly, eyes shining with both relief and pride. In that moment, Olivia understood that she had irrevocably changed not only her own life and her mother's, but also that of her birth father, who now had no way to return to the past. For Kevin Wellington, life after the trial became an unending nightmare. As he was escorted out of the courtroom, he felt the contempt of the press, former colleagues, and the upstanding citizens who once admired him. Within hours, News outlets across the country had exposed his frauds and deceptions. The polished image of a powerful, successful real estate mogul collapsed entirely, replaced by that of a heartless swindler unmasked by his own daughter in the light of justice. An immediate federal investigation confirmed every allegation Olivia had detailed. His previous financial schemes were reopened, and his victims, hard-pressed families, small business owners, and elderly widows, came forward to tell their stories. Within weeks, Kevin was convicted, handed a severe prison sentence, and had his assets seized to compensate those he had wronged. Prison life proved to be Kevin's personal hell. Stripped of his wealth, forced into an existence of deprivation and loneliness, he spent sleepless nights haunted by the memory of Olivia standing firm in court, her clear, unwavering gaze piercing him like a constant indictment. He realized he had lost everything, not only his fortune and influence, but the final chance to be a decent father. That realization was a punishment far more excruciating than any legal penalty. Meanwhile, Olivia became a national sensation. Her story, of a 9-year-old girl who stood up to a powerful father to defend her mother and uphold justice, captivated millions across social media, news broadcasts, and talk shows. She was invited onto national television programs and public forums, where she described how she'd prepared for the case, what she'd learned, and her mature reflections on children's rights and social justice. The image of a small yet resolute girl with bright eyes and boundless courage inspired countless other children and families across America. I believe every child has a voice, and that voice deserves to be heard, Olivia told a national audience. No one is too young to stand up for what's right. I hope my story encourages other kids to speak out for their own rights. Her heartfelt words sparked a wave of social initiatives and campaigns to raise awareness of children's rights and protect them from abuse and exploitation, even by their own relatives. Olivia's fame endured beyond a fleeting media moment. She became a lasting symbol of youthful determination and bravery, honored by numerous child welfare organizations. As for Janet Thompson, her life transformed as well. At the hospital where she worked, the story of her and Olivia became a source of immense pride. Colleagues, doctors, and patients alike regarded her with newfound respect and affection, admiring not only Olivia's strength but Janet's selfless devotion, perseverance, and unconditional love as a single mother. Before long, the hospital administration promoted her to nurse manager, recognizing both her extensive experience and the extraordinary qualities she demonstrated: courage, resilience, and boundless love for her daughter. Janet emerged as a powerful role model for single mothers everywhere, women who endure hardship without ever giving up hope. In the months that followed, Janet and Olivia appeared regularly on television and at community events, spreading messages of family love, solidarity, and the inner strength we all possess when faced with adversity. Together, they had journeyed through their darkest days, and now stood stronger than ever, inspiring others and uplifting their community. Meanwhile, Kevin Wellington lived on in solitude and regret, haunted by the knowledge that he had destroyed the most precious things in his life. He understood now that his punishment was more than a prison sentence. It was the endless torment of knowing he'd betrayed his daughter's trust and squandered any chance at redemption. But for Olivia and Janet, the future lay bright and open. They had triumphed not only for themselves, but also on behalf of all those longing for justice. Their journey, from suffering to victory, served as living proof that even in the bleakest circumstances, courage, truth, and love will always find a way to prevail. The life of Janet and Olivia after the trial was more than a personal victory. It marked the beginning of a new, far-reaching journey. After months in the national spotlight, Olivia realized that winning in court was not the ultimate goal. For her, it was just the first step in a long, challenging mission to protect the rights of millions of other children who lack the means or opportunity to speak up as she did. When Olivia turned 12, supported by her mother and dedicated collaborators, she published her first book, A Child's Voice. The book not only recounts Olivia's own journey but provides clear guidance on how children can safeguard their legal rights, find legal assistance, and believe in their own worth and inner strength. Upon release, A Child's Voice became a publishing phenomenon, embraced by millions of readers and adopted by schools, community organizations, and social justice groups as an essential resource. Recognizing the book's positive impact, Olivia and her mother founded the A Child's Voice Community Library Network. These libraries didn't just lend appropriate legal guides to children and parents. They also served as free legal advice centers where struggling families could get prompt, effective help to defend their rights. Thousands of families across America benefited. Stories poured in. Single mothers escaping domestic abuse, children fighting for their right to an education, immigrant families resisting exploitation and injustice. Though still young, Olivia had already changed countless lives and emerged as a powerful symbol of courage, intelligence, and perseverance in the fight for justice. By the time she turned 17, Harvard University awarded Olivia a prestigious scholarship. Harvard recognized not only her academic brilliance, but also her extraordinary contributions to children's rights and the legal field. At Harvard, Olivia quickly distinguished herself, delving deeper into child and rights law and nurturing her dream of becoming an outstanding attorney to protect the futures of millions more children. Meanwhile, in a suburban Chicago prison, Kevin Wellington lived a radically different existence. Once a famed real estate tycoon, he was now an anonymous inmate steeped in isolation, shame, and regret. Through news reports and TV segments, he followed every step and achievement of his daughter. Each time he saw her radiant smile and confident gaze on screen, he felt a crushing pain. Kevin came to understand that his greatest mistake was underestimating his own daughter. He had thought Olivia fragile and easy to manipulate. In fact, she proved to be far stronger, smarter, and more resilient than he could have imagined. His own actions had demolished his chance to be a father he could ever be proud of, the ultimate irreversible error and punishment beyond any legal sentence. Meanwhile, Janet Thompson flourished as a single mother. She excelled as a hospital administrator, earning respect and affection from colleagues and the community. She was a constant presence beside Olivia at community events and children's rights and women's rights campaigns. Janet became a living emblem of strength and persistence, inspiring thousands of women facing similar struggles. Olivia never forgot that behind every success lay her mother's quiet sacrifice and boundless love. When she delivered her scholarship lecture at Harvard, she addressed thousands. "My mother, Janet Thompson, is the true hero of my life. Without her, I would never have found my voice. I hope that through our work, millions more children around the world will discover their own voices." In his small, lonely cell, Kevin Wellington heard these words over an old radio. He closed his eyes, bitterly realizing the harsh truth. The daughter he had once dismissed was now his greatest source of pride. Olivia had soared far beyond his expectations, becoming a compassionate, powerful woman of remarkable talent. In that moment, Kevin understood that the small, determined voice he had tried to ignore now resonated across the globe, bringing light and hope to millions. And he knew that this lesson would stand as the most costly and enduring regret of his life. Over the years that followed, Olivia's life continued to stand as a vivid testament to courage and the power of justice. The achievements she steadily amassed were no longer mere personal victories, but had become a vital part of the relentless fight for children's rights across America. At 16, Olivia made headlines as the youngest lawyer in American history, surpassing the strictest standards with an astonishingly outstanding track record. In the emotionally charged moment of taking the oath before thousands of attentive eyes, Olivia realized that her true journey was only just beginning. Without delay, Olivia launched one of the most groundbreaking lawsuits in U.S. education history, suing the national education system for failing to provide sufficient instruction on children's rights and basic legal principles in public schools. With razor-sharp arguments, she contended that this deficiency directly led to thousands of children having their rights violated, being exploited, and lacking the ability to defend themselves against injustice. Initially, the case faced considerable opposition, particularly from conservative elements within the education establishment. Yet, through perseverance, compelling reasoning, and hundreds of real-life examples from children she had personally assisted, she gradually won widespread support from the public and leading education experts. Ultimately, after a grueling trial, the national education system officially acknowledged its serious failings and committed to comprehensively overhaul the curriculum, making legal education and children's rights a mandatory component of K-12 schooling nationwide. This historic victory not only marked a pivotal moment in Olivia's career, but also powerfully affirmed the role and voice of children in modern society. From coast to coast, millions of young people were now empowered with knowledge, confidence, and the ability to protect themselves against injustice, something that had once seemed impossible. Alongside her inspiring legal career, Olivia continued to build and expand the Voice of Children library network across the states, transforming it into a leading nonprofit organization dedicated to child protection and free legal aid. These libraries became a second home for countless families in need, a place where the light of justice never fades. Janet Thompson, the single mother who once struggled alone against life's storms, now smiled with deep happiness as she watched her daughter's extraordinary growth. No longer just a respected nursing manager, Janet had become a sought-after speaker at social forums, delivering powerful messages about the strength and resilience of single mothers. Janet proudly told everyone, "If I was Olivia's strength when she was little, then today, Olivia is my boundless source of strength." Meanwhile, as Olivia and Janet shone ever brighter, Kevin Wellington lived in silent solitude, tormented by unending regret. His years behind bars had taught him that the greatest mistake of his life wasn't the frauds he committed or the loss of fame and fortune. It was squandering his chance to be a true father to Olivia. From afar, through the few updates he received in prison, he followed his daughter's daily growth with an aching heart and profound remorse, realizing he had gravely underestimated his own child's strength and determination. Time passed, and the story of Olivia and Janet continued to spread, transcending the bounds of time to become an endless source of inspiration for future generations. Olivia had become a steadfast symbol of justice, bravery, and genuine compassion. Many years later, at a special ceremony honoring the most impactful contributors to society, Olivia stood at the podium with bright, confident, and serene eyes. Before thousands of rapt listeners, she sought out her mother's familiar silhouette in the audience, gave her a warm smile, and then proudly spoke. "All that I have achieved today began with a small moment, when I decided to speak out against injustice. Back then, I was just a 9-year-old girl with one wish, to protect my mother. But today, I stand here to tell you that no one is ever too small to change the world. Every child's voice can be the beginning of a better future." The auditorium erupted into enthusiastic applause as everyone rose to their feet. Olivia stood there, proud, moved, yet humble, fully aware that her journey would never truly end, because out there were still many other Olivias, children who needed to be heard and whose rightful protections needed to be defended. And somewhere, in a cold, small prison cell, Kevin Wellington closed his eyes, his heart pierced by pride mingled with deep shame. But for the first time in his life, he knew one thing with absolute clarity. Olivia didn't just change her own fate, she changed the world. The little girl he once underestimated had built a legacy beyond her years, forged by courage, intellect, and the power of a voice that was small but mighty. What do you think of Olivia's extraordinary journey? If you were in her shoes, what would be the very first thing you would do to protect your own rights and those of your loved ones? If this inspiring story has touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel to continue joining us on the journey of spreading the most positive and meaningful messages.